when I was a kid, a burger cost a nickel. Or seen a vintage sign selling a Corvette for $1,000? Boy, would it have been sweet to live in that time, right? Actually, because of inflation, it would be pretty much the same. Inflation is the overall rise in prices of goods and services in an economy. Here's Claire. Claire heads over to the corner store to buy a pack of gum. That pack of gum costs Claire $1. Fast forward a year, and Claire heads to the exact same corner store and buys the exact same pack of gum. This time, though, the pack of gum costs Claire $1.02. That 2% rise in the price of the gum is inflation. Inflation causes a rise in prices and also causes the value of your money, known as purchasing power, to decrease. Claire's $1 is worth less today than it did last year. In general, the demand for goods and services in an economy is greater than the supply, causing prices to rise and therefore inflation. Governments can control the inflation rate by adjusting the supply of money in the economy. Developed countries like the US try to keep inflation around 3%. Because your money decreases in value every year, it's important to grow your savings through investment.
My name is Sumaya Nur Shahida and I will explain about inflation. What is inflation? Inflation is a condition where the general level of prices of goods and services in the market rises sustainably over a period of time. In an inflationary situation, the purchasing power of money decreases as the banknotes or digital currencies that individuals hold cannot buy the same amount of goods and services as before. Inflation is generally measured in the percentage terms and is usually calculated as the annual percentage change in the Consumer Price Index (CPI) or Producer Price Index (PPI). These indices cover a wide range of goods and services consumed or produced by society, and change in these indices reflect overall price changes.
Economy inflation is basically the sustained increase in the general price level of goods and services over time. It means that the money in your pocket can buy you less stuff than it could before. We've all experienced this at some point, right? Prices going up and our purchasing power going down. Now, let's talk about the common causes for economy inflation. There are a few key factors at play here. Demand pull inflation. This occurs when the demand for goods and services exceeds the supply. When people have more money to spend, they tend to buy more, and that drives up prices. Cost push inflation. This happens when the cost of production increases for businesses. When businesses face higher costs for raw materials, labor, or other factors of production, they pass those costs on to consumers, resulting in higher prices. Monetary inflation. This one is a biggie. It occurs when a central bank, like the Federal Reserve, increases the money supply in an economy. When there's more money floating around, its value decreases, and prices go up. Understanding economy inflation is crucial because it affects our everyday lives. It impacts the prices we pay, the wages we earn, and the overall health of the economy. By having a solid grasp of inflation, you'll be better equipped to navigate your financial decisions. That's a wrap for today's video. If you found this information helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Tipstronomy channel for more valuable content. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more you know about economy inflation, the better you can protect and grow your finances. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.
My name is Arni Subramaniam and my metric number is 291926. Let's look at the measuring inflation. Consumers' cost of living depends on the prices of many goods and services and the share of each in the household budget. To measure the average consumer's cost of living, government agency conduct household survey to identify a basket of commonly purchased items and track over time and cost of purchasing this basket. The cost of this basket at a given time expressed relative to a base year is the consumer's price index, which is CPI, and the percentage change in the CPI over a certain period is consumer's price inflation, the most widely used measure of inflation. Core consumers inflation focused on the underlying and persistent trends in inflation by excluding prices set by the government and the more volatile prices of products such as food and energy, most affected by seasonal factors or temporary supply conditions. Core inflation is also watched closely by policymakers. Calculation of an overall inflation rate for a country, say, and not just for consumers, requires an index with broader coverage such as the GDP deflator. Now, let's look at the Malaysian inflation rate. The annual inflation rate in Malaysia is to 2.8% in May 2023 from 3.3% in the previous month and less than market forecast of 3%. It marketed the lowest reading since May 2022 due mainly to the further slowdown in price for transport, which is 1% versus 2.3% in April, and food and non-alcoholic beverage, which is 5.9% versus 6.3%. Also, inflation lowered the furnishing household equipment and maintenance, which is 2.7% versus 3%, health 1.9% versus 2.1%, and clothing and footwear is 0.4% versus 0.5%, while costs continued to decline for communication, which decreases to 3.7% versus negative 1.4%. The core consumer prices, which excluded volatile items of fresh food and administrated prices, increased 3.5% year on year, the softest rise in 10 months. On a monthly basis, the CPI grew 0.2% slightly, up from a 0.1% rise in April.
Now I'm going to introduce the cause of inflation. There are three main causes of inflation, which is demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, and built-in inflation. First, let's go to demand pull inflation. The term demand pull inflation usually describes a widespread phenomenon. That is, when consumer demand outpaces the available supply of many types of consumer goods, demand pull inflation sets in, forcing an overall increase in the cost of living. Demand pull inflation is a tenet of Keynesian economics that describes the effects of an imbalance in aggregate supply and demand. When the aggregate demand in an economy strongly outweighs at the aggregate supply, price goes up. This is the most common cause of inflation. Next, let's talk about cost push inflation. The most common cause of cost push inflation starts with an increase in the cost of production, which may be expected or unexpected. For example, the cost of raw materials and inventory used in production might increase, leading to higher costs. For cost push inflation to take place, demand for the affected product must remain constant during the time the production cost changes are occurring. To compensate for the increased cost of production, producers raise the price to the consumer to maintain profit levels while keeping pace with expected demand. Lastly, we have come to built-in inflation. Built-in inflation, which is sometimes referred to as a wage price spiral, occur when workers demand higher wage to keep up with rising living costs. This in turn causes businesses to raise their price in order to offset their rising wage costs, leading to a self-reinforcing loop of wage and price increase.
There are a few effects of the price rising among people. First, inflation erodes purchasing power. If inflation primary and most pervasive effect, an overall rise in prices over time reduce the purchasing power of consumers since a fixed amount of money will afford progressively less consumption. Consumers lose purchasing power regardless of what the inflation rate is, whether it is 2% or 4%. Second, inflation disproportionately impact lower income consumer. Lower income consumers tend to spend a higher proportion of their income on necessities that those with higher income. This means they have less of a cushion against the loss of purchasing power in inflation. Policymakers and financial market participants often focus on core inflation. This measurement of inflation excludes the price of food and energy because they tend to be more volatile and less reflective of the longer-term inflation trend. But earners with lower income spend a relatively large proportion of their weekly or monthly household budget on food and energy. Next, inflation raises interest rates. As we know, government and central banks have a powerful incentive to keep inflation in check. The approach has been managed inflation using monetary policy. When inflation exceeds a central bank target, policymakers can raise the minimum interest rate, driving borrowing costs higher across the economy by constraining the money supply. As a result, inflation and interest rates tend to move in the same direction. By raising interest rates as inflation rates rise, central bank can dampen the economy risk appetite and the attendant price pressure. Lastly, inflation lower debt service costs. While new borrowers are likely to face higher interest rates when inflation rises, those with fixed rate mortgages and other loans get the benefit of repaying this with inflated money, lowering their debt service costs after adjusting for inflation. Say you borrow 1,000 at a 5% annual rate of interest. If annual inflation subsequently rises to 10%, the annual decline in your inflation-adjusted loan balance will outweigh your interest costs. These are a few instances of inflation in various nations. Although Japan and the United States are powerful nations that can influence the global economy, their citizens will also be impacted by inflation.
Hi, my name is Nurul Ain binti Rosli and my metric number is 296838. Ways to overcome price rising. Firstly, monetary policy. Monetary policy is the action that Bank Negara Malaysia takes to influence interest rates in the economy. As the Central Bank of Malaysia, BNM's role is to promote monetary and financial stability. This is aimed at providing the conditions suitable for sustainable growth of the Malaysian economy. To achieve monetary stability, our Monetary Policy Committee sets monetary policy to keep inflation low and stable while supporting economic growth. The MPC sets monetary policy by changing the overnight policy rate. The OPR is BNM's policy interest rate that influences, among others, banks' lending and financing rate, as well as deposit rates. These rates tell you how much the cost of loan is or how much the returns are for deposits. They are applicable for both conventional and Islamic finance products. Change in the OPR affect economic activity and overall price level changes, typically by influencing interest rates in the economy. When we increase the OPR, higher interest rate on savings and loans will influence people to save more and spend less. For example, when the demand for goods and services in the economy is more than the supply available, prices will keep rising. People will pay more to buy what they want. The higher OPR will help to slow demand down. This brings demand more in line with supply and prices will increase more slowly. The reverse happens when we reduce the OPR. Lower interest rates on loans and savings will get people to save less and spend more. This spurs economic activity and avoids a situation of falling price level due to weak demand, which will hurt the economy. The higher prices we see today are a global issue. Higher production costs were one of the main reasons inflation increased. Malaysia is also affected by this. Higher commodity prices are a key reason behind the increases in price we are seeing. Compared to other countries, the rising price have been less extreme in Malaysia. We have full subsidized and price controls that keep inflation lower. However, such measures could come at a large cost to the country. This is because the government will have to keep spending a large amount to keep prices low. This reduces how much the government can allocate for productive spending or other forms of support, especially for those who need it most. Fiscal policy. Fiscal policy has played an important role in supporting recovery momentum and easing the burden of the rakyat while maintaining fiscal discipline. The counter-clinical measures implemented by the government have enabled the country to recover from the economic downturn caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. As the economy is gaining momentum, a slowdown in the global economy and prolonged geopolitical tension continue to influence the government's fiscal and debt position. In this regard, the government is committed to remain prudent and disciplined in managing public finance to ensure a long-term fiscal sustainability. Fiscal policy remains responsive to address any risks to the country's economy and the well-being of the rakyat due to the uncertainties of the global economic activities. Nevertheless, the government needs to strike a balance between the cause of accelerate growth momentum and control inflationary pressures as well as continue prudent fiscal management. Therefore, in consonance with the modernist aspiration, fiscal resources are channeled towards strengthening the social safety net for the rakyat, improving education and learning infrastructure, enhancing the health sector, ensuring food security, boosting impactful investment activity as well as promoting the digitalization and connectivity. The revenue is expected to be lower at RM 291.50 billion or 15.4% of GDP as a result of slower global economic growth and anticipated moderation of commodity prices. Total expenditure is estimated to be slightly lower at RM 386.1 billion or 20.4% of GDP, mainly due to expiry of COVID-19 fund and spending optimization measures.
Okay, now I'm going to explain on the conclusion part. In conclusion, we can see that item price inflation can cause increased demand, decreased supply, increased cost, and also inflation expectations. This is because item price inflation is a phenomenon that can be caused by a number of factors. It can have a number of negative effects on consumers, businesses, and the economy as a whole. In conclusion, inflation can cause a weaker ringgit, which could affect negative and positive on the Malaysian economy. For example, it can increase the price of imported goods, which can lead to a higher inflation. However, it can also stimulate economic activity by making exports more competitive. Additionally, a weaker ringgit can prompt Malaysian business to re-evaluate their supply chains, potentially sourcing more materials domestically and reducing import reliance. This shift does not only stimulate economic activity within the country, but also fosters innovation in local industries. For example, inflation could make it more expensive for Malaysians to buy imported cars, electronics, and other goods. This could lead to higher inflation as businesses pass on their increased costs to consumers. However, a weaker ringgit could also make Malaysian export more competitive as they become cheaper for foreign buyers, and this could also lead to increased export and boost to economy.